Our moderator today is Bill Luria. Bill will go over the rules. Bill is a former president of the board of directors of the Bainbridge Island Senior and Community Center, and he also has been headlining, working to coordinate the beginning stages of our capital campaign so that we have a larger room to hold events like this.
Right.
So with that, I will, I'm going to slip this under and ask one of you to put this right there. And then, Bill, you can take it away.
Sure. So I also want to welcome the candidates for the city council seats to discuss some really interesting issues that we've put together. 3 wards are being contested. In the South Ward, Sarah Blossom and Mike Nelson. The Central Ward, Clarence Moriwaki and Peter Raffa. And the North Ward, Joe Deets and Lara Lant. And thank you for all being here. And I also wanted to thank everyone here. You can see by the turnout that there's a real strong interest in this particular contest. And I mean, we're overflowing, so there's a lot of interest here. The format for the discussion. Each candidate will have up to 2 minutes to respond to questions. Mike, Herb Heathcote, Herb, will be the timekeeper. We'll have a series of questions that we've prepared, and then we'll open it up to the audience for you to ask questions of the various candidates. And there'll be an opportunity at the end for a 3-minute closing statement from each of you. Also, is John? Yeah, we'll also streaming this live, by the way, and will be made available on the Bainbridge Community Seniors Center YouTube site afterwards. So streaming live now and then available on YouTube. Any questions before we get started? Mike?
Has it changed from 5 minutes to 3 minutes?
Say that?
Has it changed from 5 minutes to 3 minutes for the closing?
We went...
Well, it's not working. It is.
The
Okay.
reason... The reason
closing-
we're going to ask responses for 2 minutes this time.
The closing.
Oh, 3 minutes for closing. We can see let's hold it and see how far we get and see if it makes sense after a couple of hours. Okay, so we should get started, but first a favor, and this is from several people you've heard. Let's try to avoid, or at least minimize, those easy political cliches that we hear over and over again. You know the ones, I'm an environmentalist, or I'm a fiscal conservative, or one of my favorites, I'm a consensus builder. You know, focusing on the issues rather than these cliches really helps us understand you better. So for the first question, and we're going to go in order, and I'm going to try to mix them up so people have different chances to come first, second, or last. And we'll start with you, Sarah, okay? What are your 1 or 2 highest priority issues for the upcoming council? And what specific qualifications, skills, and experiences do you have that make you best qualified to address those issues?
Is this on? Because it doesn't, okay. I would say my highest priority, and it affects multiple issues, is modifying how the council operates. I see the city manager venturing into the area of policymaking more and more, and I see the council being left out of some important policymaking discussions, whether that's about process, for example, developing the process for updating our largest policy document, the comprehensive plan, or even having meaningful input in that policy document. I think that the council needs to take back some of that power, and I think that there needs to be more deliberations made in the public. It seems that council comes to meetings ready to vote, and the public isn't often able to hear, there's no deliberations taking place. We don't hear the thought process or the reasonings for these decisions that are being made. And I think that's important. I think we're entitled to hear it. I think it's important for us. I see frustration in the community that I think comes out of there being inadequate information provided on agenda items, on city decisions. I see less communication than there used to be. We used to have quarterly ward meetings. That's now been cut down to annual ward meetings, and there has yet to be one this year. And I think that that's leading to a lot of mistrust and, as I said, frustration. And I think the first step is to look at council operations, and having been on council for 8 years in the past and on the planning commission for the last 5 years, and now seeing council operations from the outside has given me a different perspective. I think that I'm able to step into that role and help guide the council back in the other direction.
Mike?
Hello, Mike Nelson. Thanks for having me. So my highest priorities, of course, would be, if it's still outstanding, the comprehensive plan update and completion of the groundwater management plan. And I think that it really focuses on growth and water, right? And so I think that we need to be thoughtful about those issues. And I think I would echo Sarah around process. And related to these issues, from a process standpoint, I came across something that very much concerned me, which is that when I went through the 600 and something pages of the draft environmental impact statement, I came across a single footnote that stated that the methodology for calculating land capacity was done differently for Winslow than it was done for the rest of the island. And I said, what? And then it's all put into one nice happy little chart that says this is the capacity in Winslow, this is the capacity outside of Winslow, and this is the total capacity. So taking apples and oranges and putting them all together and calling them all apples, right? And that's a complete process failure. And then when Sarah came to council, I think it was in June or July, with a question, and they did an interim capacity analysis saying, okay, if we added 2,000 units to Winslow, let's do this interim capacity analysis. I just heard back from the city that, in fact, they used a third different methodology to calculate capacity there. And so from my perspective, this does not make sense. And so I think that when we are planning for growth, when we're planning to protect our groundwater moving forward, when we're planning for affordable housing, we need to do things right, and we need to start from facts, and we need to make sure everything is done correctly. And so the skills and qualifications for me, I'm a lawyer, I'm a public servant career-wise. I currently work for the state of Washington. And then I'm just a concerned citizen and a curious person. And that's how I ended up finding this out and why I'm so concerned today. Thank you.
Clarence?
Okay. I'm Clarence Moriwaki, and I've had this pleasure and honor of serving all of you for the last 3 years and 10 months, and I hope to continue that. The two things I'm really focused on, when I first got elected, it shocked me because when I learned about the budget, our delta was going opposite directions in that our expenses were going to be less than the income we were having, the revenue we were having, and that was going to be in 2022, 2023. We worked on this as a city. Joe Deets, other council members, we wanted to make sure we were fiscally responsible. We made some tough choices. A lot of things that I would have rather had to do would be to have more public safety investments there and other things, but we said, no, we have to keep our fiscal base. We are balanced until 2030. We're one of the only cities, only city in Kitsap County and one of the few throughout the state that didn't dip into our reserves. Kitsap County had to dip into reserves and make major cuts. We did that. We kept that reserve because we'll be able to do anything. When anything happens to our city, especially with these federal cuts, we have sufficient of reserves to last us 3 to 6 months. The second thing I want to really work on is continue working on improving our infrastructure. You've seen the improvements we have already done already. The Madison Avenue project that just completed Head of the Bay, and perhaps this is the biggest public works project our city has ever undertaken, the new water tank, which is going to be solid, dependable service because it's gravity fed. Some of the projects you're seeing right now, including the bundled Madison project, were because we had to put in bigger, stronger lines because this water pressure is so much greater. And this is going to be lasting for generations. And what that means is you're going to have more reliable service. And more importantly, with our partners from the fire district, it's going to be that we have very guaranteed good fire suppression flows. These are the kind of things that we do that we don't get headlines on, but it's the kind of stuff that I like to look forward to because these are investments that are going to be with us way long I'm gone. And the third one is we are behind on our road maintenance. We need to do a lot more because some of our roads are at the critical stage, and when you get to that point, you simply have to stop. No, we need to make sure that we can make those roads safe for future generations.
Thank you, Clarence. Could
Peter.
you repeat the question?
Yeah,
To make sure I answer it correctly.
What are your one or two highest priorities for the upcoming council? And what specific qualifications, skills, and experiences do you have to best deal with those priorities?
Thank you. I think that transparency and accountability and reliability are important and critical to make any decision in City Council. Closer to my mouth. Does that work? Okay. Transparency, accountability, reliability are important. Something I don't see much of in the current, as I go to City Council meetings as far as transparency is concerned. I also echo Sarah in the fact that I see some improvements that we could make in City Council, especially dealing with the city manager and putting too many things in the consent agenda that are not discussed publicly that should be discussed publicly. I went to one city council meeting, it was 2 pages of consent agenda. Consent agenda is supposed to be routine, simple things to keep the meeting going forward, like board minutes and things like that. The other concern I have is the water. I'm glad we have a water tank, but if we don't have any water to put in the water tank, it doesn't do us any good. So I think that we need to conserve the water. We need environmental studies. I don't know where we are with the comprehensive plan other than it was due December 2024. Hasn't been done yet. We spent more money for the consultant to keep going with the comprehensive plan. Where's the water management plan? Where's the sub area plan? I'm a fundraiser by profession, so I like to plan. I like development plans. If you fail to plan, the plan will fail. I have 30 seconds left. I love this community. I've been here for 32 years. I listen. I respect people's voices, and I know that they want to be heard, and I'm here to hear them. So thank you before you hold up the red thing.
Yeah. Joe.
Hello? Does that work? Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. Can I try yours? No. No? Okay. We spend half our time dealing with mics. So good to see you all. Yeah, Joe Deets. I'm running for my 3rd term, Bainbridge Island City Council. I think a lot of you know me very well because I'm in my 4th year of my 2nd term, 8 years on council. I wish to remain for a 3rd term. And why is that? Is because we need to continue the work that we are doing, particularly on our climate action plan. The climate is changing and we need to adapt in order to preserve what it is that is important to us. We have an excellent climate action plan, but we need to implement it. Implementation is far harder than just doing the plan. I have a background in solar energy for a dozen years. I know about doing clean energy projects. I am thoroughly committed to ensuring that the climate action plan gets implemented. It's very easy to sidetrack projects as they come to council. Frankly, as we saw with the gas-powered leaf blower ordinance, just for example, a fairly minor item, but what's going to happen, folks, when a more substantive item for the climate action plan comes before council, there'll be pushback, guarantee it. This council member, I have the political will to make sure that does not happen. Another priority is, I'm sorry, is there sound here? I'm not stopping, right? Okay, 30 seconds? Oh gosh, affordable housing. We do not have enough housing for our seniors, workers, families. We need that. We need that for environmental reasons. We need that for economic reasons, and frankly, we need it for legal reasons. So we need to implement affordable housing. We're making great progress on sort of the smaller projects such as ADUs and liveaboards, but we need to do substantially more in order to complete this. Okay.
Lara.
All right, thank you very much for coming here today. I'm Lara Lant, and my top priorities for upcoming council would be 2 items that have been addressed already thus far, so I guess that's the benefit of going last. I do think that there is a tremendous need for a boost in communications from City Hall to everybody out there, not just the 500 people who show up to the planning counter or Public Works or to the occasional council meeting. There's 24,000 plus of you that maybe don't know what's going on and would like more opportunity to hear about things. The new candidates for this upcoming election, we actually had a moment of unification. We had unity. We co-wrote a letter and submitted it to current city council and the city manager requesting that we have ward meetings. And the reply came back. They said no. They said it was too close to election season. It might get too heated. I guess that's the point of ward meetings, though, isn't it? That you want to know what's going on. So I would push for more engagement, much more aggressive engagement with the public. The second item that I would be doing right off the bat is looking at the city's budget, looking at how we've prioritized things with fresh lens in light of the new federal restrictions coming down on various grant-funded projects, for example, things that we're already putting money out towards that might have conditions or restrictions placed on it, and make sure we understand what we're getting into when we match funds or we push forward large amounts of capital for projects that may not get fully funded. So those are my top two. Oh, and my experience in these is I worked for the city of Bainbridge Island for 14 years in various departments, including the planning department. And so I have seen from the inside out how the consequences of council decisions can often trickle down and then affect not just staff trying to explain to the public what new regulations are and how they may affect you, but also just to stakeholders like yourself. So I see it through that, new ideas through those lens.
Thank you, Lara. So we talked about priorities. Another question came up. What do you believe is the single biggest challenge facing the council next year? And what's your approach to dealing with that challenge? We'll mix it up. We'll start with Peter this time.
Thank you, Clarence.
I'm going to try to go back and, I don't know. But
That's okay.
We'll try to figure it out.
There are many challenges, I think, that we face, economic, and well, I think that the housing, as Joe mentioned, is critically important. Affordable housing is important. The current project, 625, where the police station used to be, I feel is inappropriate for the location. I feel that Lehigh, as a management company, is woefully unqualified. If you see what they're doing in Seattle, not maintaining the properties appropriately, I just don't want to see that here on Bainbridge. I would much rather Housing Resources Board take a larger role in that project if possible. So that's a challenge. Housing is important. Affordable housing is important as a challenge. I think the operation of the way in which City Council operates with the city manager is also going to be a challenge in the future. And as Lara mentioned, the grants. One world I know much about is grants and how to write grants, how to report on grants, and I'm afraid that the federal grants are going to be cut back and that we're investing in some of the grants that are going to be pulled back, and it's not going to be good for the city.
Thank you, Peter. Clarence?
Well, thank you. And I wouldn't disagree very much with a lot of things that Peter just said. But back to finances, he mentioned that, and I mentioned that earlier. This is really the core of what we do. Make sure we spend your tax dollars wisely, and make sure we try to keep rate increases low. And we've done that, I think, pretty well this year. Unfortunately, one of the things that we had to do was raise rates on some of our utilities because they had not been raised in over a decade. And that was, I'm not going to beat up on previous councils, whatever decisions they made, but had they just adjusted for inflation alone, we would have more money raised than what we had to do through rate increases today. And I hate doing that because I know what it's like to be on a fixed income. I don't make a lot of money myself. And so I know that impact on that. But we do need those revenues to invest in the critical infrastructure improvements we have to have. So that's the balancing act we have to do. And it would be very easy in a political sense to say, I'm not going to vote for rate increases or anything because that looks bad that you're reading that. But that's not really the responsible or grown-up thing to do. We have things to do. We have things to take care of and invest in reliable infrastructure. You're not just going to get the money from the sky. And Peter does make a good point. The federal government's grants are very unpredictable. And what's coming down, we've seen at other communities, that they're going to require, they say things like, you must comply and assist any law enforcement engagement that is asked for you or demanded from the federal government. And I'll tell you, should that come to me, even if we have a $5 or $6 million grant, I can't support that. And yesterday's marches show that. That's terrorism tactics, that's extortion. And with the Japanese Americans here, the law enforcement people at the time, the Kitsap County sheriffs, all of them, and with the FBI, came and raided all the Japanese American homes simultaneously and took away 35 of our elders. So our islands have lived with this. And that's a legacy that we say we don't want to happen again. So I hope this doesn't come to us. But if that decision comes where the grant is necessary for us to win that grant or keep it, I'm afraid I would not support retaining that grant.
Lara?
Thank you. I think kind of the most primary conversation that will be coming up in 2026 might be actually a city manager search. I think that's something that is, and no joke, I think it's something that I think that he's already considered his own contract with the city. And we need to be responsible and looking forward and starting a search in case our current city manager, whose contract has expired, decides that he's done here. So as we know, it's very important that we have a strong leader in the administration of council policy. And finding that right leader is time-consuming. It has to be thoughtful. It's got to be part of a community effort. We need to find a leader that can understand what our city's goals and where we came from, how we are, where we are right now. So I do believe that's going to be a big topic of conversation coming up. But on the heels of that, back to affordable housing, of course, is running right neck and neck with that. So there'll be lots of conversation going on about that.
Okay, thank you. Joe?
Okay. Hopefully this oh, great. Yes, thank you for the question. I will echo Laura's city manager search. First off, we don't know, but let's just say the city manager does choose to leave. I think we need to rely on experience on this council. I've worked for 4 city managers. I was part of the interview committee to select what was Blair King. I actually, as mayor, led the review of the city manager's review process. So that, but we don't know. But if that he will be leaving, but I am prepared to work on that. But getting back to affordable housing, as we know, 65 Winslow has been paused. I don't think any of us know what is going to happen next because we don't know. There's an appeal, SEPA appeal. There's the Housing Trust Fund application. I'm not sure quite what has happened. So there's a lot of unknowns about 65. But one thing that is known is that we need substantial progress in affordable housing. We need that. Also, the other thing we need is we need a more community engagement on that. What I would love, here's my wish list for community engagement, is we agree as a collective that we have to choose a project. Let's come with some ideas. And I would love to have everyone come and say, where would you like a housing project to happen? You can't say no, folks. You have to pick something or at least have a ranked choice. So I would love to have that engagement because we need to do that. We don't know what's going to happen 65. Set that aside. But let's focus on the need for affordable housing. As far as communications, I'm a council member who's had office hours ever since I was first elected. I'm the only council member who does that. Why is that important? I have met hundreds of people probably a lot of folks in this room, one-on-one and in groups, listening to them. What is important to them? What do they want to tell a council member? And I tell them, how does the city council work? How can I help them? And by the way, board meetings, yes, please. They happened when I was mayor, so thank you.
Thank you. Mike?
Okay, I think the single biggest challenge is water. I actually believe that balancing water and compliance with HB 1220, which is the new sort of affordable housing growth bill that amended the Growth Management Act, is going to be a challenge. But stepping back, so Bainbridge Island is designated as a sole source aquifer and gets all of its drinking water from groundwater. So current policy within the water resources element in the comp plan actually requires that we protect the long-term sustainability of the island's water resources, and actually explicitly requires that new development and population growth be managed so that our water resources remain adequate and affordable for the indefinite future. And yet, our groundwater aquifers are currently experiencing net drawdown. In addition, modeling studies show significant net drawdown moving forward. I believe this is an unsustainable path. I think it's not good enough to say we have enough water for the next 20 years or the next 50 years. I think we're charged with making sure we have enough water for the indefinite future. So I think we need to course correct now. And when I look at the modeling studies, there's some things that concern me. That south end production wells could drop below sea level by year 50, that portions of the glacial marine aquifer could drop below sea level by year 50, that the Fletcher Bay aquifer could drop below sea level by year 50. And that could cause seawater intrusion, potentially rendering it unusable. And you have to think the Fletcher Bay aquifer actually provides 1/3 of the water, about 1/3 of the water to the entire island, and 75% of the water to Winslow. So we need to take this very seriously. So my plan around water is complete the groundwater management plan and have it peer reviewed before completing the comp plan. I know that's in process now. Complete a comprehensive water study to determine the exact carrying capacity of Bainbridge Island, and then consider revising the comp plan to prioritize availability of water above all else. And then, of course, we should consider appropriate water conservation strategies, such as wastewater beneficial reuse. And my overall plan to balance the two is, when you're thinking about overall growth, make it as low as possible to comply with our legal obligations, but to properly respect the finite nature of our water supply. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah?
I think tied in with what Mike said, water and complying with not just House Bill 1220, but finishing our comprehensive plan. And Lara, you reminded me, I had actually requested a joint City Council Planning Commission meeting when these growth management hearings boards were put out, because I thought it was time for the council to have some meaningful policy input. I think they've been deprived of that ability and was told it's too controversial of a time to do that. So that's what, the Planning Commission is being faced with. My personal opinion, speaking for myself and not other planning commissioners, of course, I feel as though we're being steered towards a kind of uniform manner in which to comply with House Bill 1220, but we're not really a uniform city. We don't have infrastructure like other cities do. We have concerns about our carrying capacity with regards to water that other cities might not. We've been given a allocation for housing that is not specific to our community's needs, and I think we saw at the last council meeting, the AMI levels we've been assigned might create a problem of whether we can actually serve our workforce we're supposed to provide 900 units at 50% and below, but will those serve our workforce? And so what happens to our workforce? So I think that the biggest challenge next year, I think the city council is going to have to finally have a conversation and get involved with the comprehensive plan and ask for some sort of relief, whether that's just some flexibility in how we comply with House Bill 1220, that the guidance that's provided by Commerce, we could check the boxes and comply with a plan that checks the boxes, but won't actually result in any affordable housing. And I think the goal should be to create a plan that results in some affordable housing if that is the actual goal of House Bill 1220.
Thank you, Sarah. Several people brought up the 625 Winslow Way project. Why don't we get into that? It's pretty controversial, so it'd be nice to have some specific answers. Do you support that particular project? an affordable housing project on that site? And if so, why? And if yes, what number of housing units do you feel comfortable with? If not, why not? And what else should happen on that site? Joe? Yeah, right.
Okay, thank you. Well, I have been supportive of 625 Winslow, and I'll tell you why. For the reasons that we need to make substantial improvements in affordable housing in this community. It is not sustainable for us economically, environmentally, or even legally for us not to make progress, significant progress in affordable housing. The reason 65 came up is because the city owns that property. It started in 2022. We started looking at this. It was it was the only site that we did a financial analysis, and it was determined that that was the best use of that property. For 3 years, we worked on that property. Not one project, not one alternative came up until what, a month or so ago. 2 projects came up. This council member reached out to the owners of those 2 properties, 251 Winslow, what would have been a hotel, the other, if you know, it was the Pavilion property. I reached out and had private conversations with both of those business owners, very good, promising conversations. But mind you, these are just conversations, and these projects are not plug and play. They take literally years and years and years to come to fruition. So here we have 65, but I think, honestly, the question, do we support it or not, I don't know what's going to happen next. You know, with the appeal, with the Housing Trust Fund, they can't complete a full application. But let's get to the point of we have to make substantial progress, whether it's 625 or one of these other sites or some other site. I think that is the key question. We cannot keep saying no or do small projects. Small projects we are already doing with HRB, with liveaboards, with ADUs. We are making good progress, but it is not enough. If we want to make sure that our businesses are adequately staffed, that we get the services that we rely on, we have to do more, and I'm committed to doing that. Thank you.
Lara?
Thank you. Okay, well, shocker, I am not in support of 625. I think for a variety of reasons I'm not in support of it. Number one, I think the process has been flawed since the inception of this project or this proposal. I do not think that there has been adequate community engagement. I think we do not have the numbers back to tell us about our water, our sewer capacity, our transportation plans. I also want to strip away some of, I know there's been a lot of misinformation, but it's been on both sides of this argument. Something that just agitates me to no end is when discussion circles around the tenants. Who's going to live in this proposed building? Well, surprise, surprise. It can be anybody. It does not have to be anybody from Bainbridge Island. It doesn't have to be a particular, staff of a grocery store. We just need to knock that out of this conversation. It feels good and it makes you want to support it. It is not something that will likely happen as far as 100% of the tenants of that building being current residents or workers on this island. I'm also, the location is just a terrible location. It just is. It's not the right site for large-scale development. I absolutely agree that affordable housing has got to make huge strides on this island, but I'm also in favor of balance, and I think going from 10 units to 90 units in one spot, in one very small spot, at the most congested intersection of our island is not the way to go about this. I am a proponent of smaller housing. For example, the plans that are in the works right here at the Senior Center for perhaps up to 60 units of some kind of affordable housing. I'm also in favor of, again, more smaller, for example, accessory dwelling units, the infill as well.
Thank you. Sarah?
I am opposed to 625 as it is proposed. I think as proposed, the scale of what's proposed does not fit that location. I am very concerned about the reduced parking that was requested. I don't think it's reasonable to expect people to live on this island and not want to get to the Kitsap Peninsula for shopping, other services. And then I'm also concerned about most of our parking in Winslow is privately owned, and I'm concerned about the impacts that those tenants who have a car but not a parking space could have on surrounding businesses. I did, back in August, speak to 6 council members and the city manager about the 251 Winslow, where the hotel had been proposed. At the time, I was thinking it would be great if that owner wanted to do a hotel at 625. I just thought a better living environment at 251. I think a hotel would benefit our downtown business owners, and a hotel generates lodging tax, which the city could use a portion of to fund affordable housing. So I saw a lot of benefit to that. That owner is not interested in building anything on Bainbridge anymore, so that's out. But the property is available, and as a planning commissioner, kind of looking at things holistically, it's been really difficult to try to convince the community that we can tuck in some pockets of density for affordable housing without changing the character, what everyone loves about Winslow. And there's flexibility with that site, the fact that it's already 2 parcels. The city could do a boundary line adjustment and have a parcel that fronts Winslow Way and let either a market rate developer or partner with HRB to do a scale of housing that fronts Winslow Way that we're more accustomed to, like townhouses. And then behind that, we can have the larger block scale building for a Lehigh project. And I see it as a sort of demonstration project of how we could achieve this.
Okay, thank you. Mike?
Yeah, I do not support the project. I think the biggest issue I have has been the process, and then I also have significant concerns about Lehigh, but I have other concerns as well. So first, making changes to our zoning before completing the groundwater management plan and the comprehensive plan, I take issue with that. I take issue with the fact that we spent significant money on a design that was not legal under the code, and then we had a big public participation meeting. It still wasn't legal under the code. It's still not legal under the code. Joe mentioned we owned the property. Well, that's not quite true. We actually used eminent domain to forcibly take over the Notch property. We did not own that. Okay, so that's not taking property that we own. These are 2 separate properties. Also, look at the SEPA appeal. I'm concerned we failed to complete the necessary environmental review. Look at questions 7 and 9 on the SEPA checklist. The whole checklist seems to be written out as if this ordinance is not spot zoning or is not being put forward to change zoning to do this project, when in fact the original version of the ordinance that went to the Planning Commission before it changed overnight without anyone seeing it, actually through the recitals described the project in depth and labeled it and defined it as, quote, the project, right? And even mentioned Lehigh by name. So I have a hard time believing that the SEPA review was the ordinance was non-project specific. Beyond that, the parking makes no sense. I think it's sort of a fantasy world to say no one's going to have cars, so half a parking spot per unit doesn't make sense to me. It's a terrible location from a traffic standpoint. And then I get into Lehigh. There's a really concerning article in the Seattle Times some time back about Lehigh and what's happened in Seattle. And essentially, Lehigh and other affordable housing developers have been coming back to Seattle again and again and again, asking for more and more money to shore up ailing properties. And because of rent collection being too low or operation costs being too high, and so I'm concerned if we do this with Lehigh, they're going to just keep coming back. And if we didn't do it with Lehigh and we owned and managed the property, we could actually give a preference to those who worked on Bainbridge Island. Thank you.
Thank you. Clarence?
One thing I've seen in this, and something we've seen often on this island, when people find something different, they use fear or tactics, and it's happening right now. I want you to go back 20 years with me when Harbor Square was being developed. Remember that? 180 units, more than double what's being proposed here, and everyone said it's going to be traffic Armageddon if you let this happen. Now, I've walked up and down that road hundreds of times over the last 2 decades and driven all times of day and night, different weekends. I am really, and be honest, I'm stressing my memory to try to think when a car went in and out of there. I've never seen a car go in and out of that project. Seriously, think about it, folks. And when you think about parking here, I'm using common sense. That would probably be the same thing, but I think this site would actually reduce traffic because the majority of people will be coming off island because they used to drive here. And why do I think that? I'm a commissioner on the Kitsap Housing Authority Board. We have the rhododendron apartments right across from the high school. We have the Finch Place over by Marsh Center. And we have more than 400 people on a waiting list for these projects, existing affordable housing. The 2/3 of them are people who don't live here, they work here. So we already have a built-up demand for this kind of housing. So to think that we can't find people who want to take advantage of this, it's not that the reality doesn't reflect that. And another thing I want to talk about is they talk about air pollution. There's going to be too much at the intersection. Well, we just had, I don't know, 800 people stand around the corner for an hour and a half there yesterday. We should have shut that thing down because how dangerous that was to be breathing that air. It just simply doesn't happen. And think about the High Life restaurant. That's there in real-time ferry traffic. They stop, they move, they're sitting outdoors for hours. So to use that as a fear tactic, it just isn't reality. And so that's the part I really want to pull the temperature down on this. There's a lot of other things to think about, but I'm just using common sense, real-time things that we've dealt with that don't really reflect those fears that people are projecting.
Peter?
Thank you. I'm a no on 625 for various reasons that people have already mentioned. But one thing is, it's the planning again. If you're writing a grant because Lehigh needed the money, the tax credits, from the Department of Commerce for the project to go forward, you look at a grant application, and what do you need in a grant application to make it successful? You need the comprehensive plan. You need a solid design. You need an environmental study. You need you need a growth management plan. All of these things aren't ready. If you've been doing this for 3 years or 4 years, why weren't these things planned? Why weren't these things done? Why weren't these things accomplished? And now all of a sudden we have to rearrange the zoning and upzoning and height restrictions to make it higher and higher. Check with the fire department to see if we have a hook and ladder that's high enough for these buildings. We're going to need a new hook and ladder. I already checked with Jared. So that's $2 million. So I think it's not a good location for the families that live there. I'm all for affordable housing, but I'm not for this project in this location for various reasons. I have a problem with Lehigh's management. Yeah, Harbor Square, high quality products put into that building. They have a building maintenance fund. Lehigh is not going to have the best quality products in building that project, nor do they have a history of maintaining the projects, in Seattle at any rate. And yes, it was also said that Mike said that Lehigh goes back and back and back with the city. Yeah, I think $9 million was spent for tenants who couldn't afford the rent from Lehigh that they got. And the mayor currently in Seattle has put $100 million in the budget for affordable housing in Seattle. And this project is the second most expensive project in the Seattle region, is this one on Bainbridge Island. $615,000 per unit. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Some issues with density and upzoning also is becoming somewhat controversial on this island. Do you support increasing density in both the High School Road and Ferry districts? And we'll start with Mike.
No, I don't. So my approach to housing, and this kind of continues on my approach to water, is that I would do no changes to our current zoning. I would reject market rate upzoning, inclusionary zoning, and affordable housing overlay because I believe they fail to produce a meaningful amount of affordable housing, and they could actually result in overall growth far above what our limited natural resources and strained infrastructure can handle. And let me use inclusionary zoning as an example. The draft environmental impact statement mentioned a percentage of 5%. Okay, it's a nice idea. And I think for a place that's not Bainbridge Island, that isn't water constrained, for instance, you could say, okay, 5% of all development need to be affordable housing, and then you could produce the necessary amount of affordable housing through overall density. But on Bainbridge Island, if you add 2,000 units to Winslow, as was previously proposed, and you use an inclusionary zoning policy, that would mean 1,900 market rate units, which will not be affordable, and 100 affordable housing units, right? And so if we're supposed to plan for and accommodate 1,139 affordable housing units over the next 20 years, you don't get anywhere near that. In fact, to use that policy and get to that actual target, you'd have to build more than 22,000 units. And you would actually have to more than triple our population. And so I don't see that as feasible. Market rate upzoning, if you look at that, and I probably have the numbers in here somewhere, but you would never, affordable housing is defined in the Growth Management Act, right? And it means you can't spend more than 30% of your income on housing and utilities, and then they break it out by area median income, and it's tied to county AMI. And so if it's an owner-occupied unit, it's 80% and below, and if it's a rental, it's 60% and below. Market rate, you look on Zillow, you'll find 0 results that'll be affordable as far as market rate units. It looks like I have to let it go, but I can go on forever on this one. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, Sarah?
Mike is right. Inclusionary zoning is not a program that is going to work here on Bainbridge. Our largest problem to solve is for the 80% AMI and below, which is 1,139 units. And we know that there is not a developer incentive program that will produce those units, and that's what inclusionary zoning is. So that would not be an appropriate tool to build those. A lot of our remaining allocation, we can use our existing capacity to satisfy that requirement. And so it's finding a program, and there's an assumption has been made that when we were looking at creating capacity in high school and Ferry, there was an assumption that that would come through an inclusionary zoning program, and that's not correct, because it's possible to have programs, whether it's something similar to what we have, like HDDP, Housing Design Demonstration Project, which HRB uses, for Ferncliff Village, HRB Erickson, or an affordable housing zone, overlay zone. You know, no one ever really defined what that would look like, but it could look similar to HDDP, where it's not like an inclusionary zoning program that was proposed in the DEIS, which was, there was a typo, it was 10% of the units would be affordable. You could require half the units are affordable, you could require 100% of the units are affordable. So that is the piece that I would say was still under discussion at the Planning Commission level is if we allow additional density for affordable housing, how much are we going to expect in order to unlock that density bonus? It's not just there for anyone to use. Part of the problem also with inclusionary zoning is a tool here is that, as Mike described, it creates an inflated amount of market rate units being built that we don't need capacity for. And any program that we design should be feasible, and that would require much more density than we have sewer capacity for currently. And then, of course, our carrying capacity with regards to water is still unknown.
Thank you. Peter?
Can you repeat the question? You're welcome. Can you repeat the question, please?
Support, there's proposals to do upzoning in both the Ferry District and the, what was the other district?
And the high school and the
High School
Ferry
Road-
District
the
for
High School Road
upzoning.
District and the Ferry District.
Okay. I'm not in favor of upzoning either one of those districts. I also, because of the high density, because we don't have the comprehensive plan, we don't have the water plan. The sewer also needs some help along with the water tank. You know, we're going to need a new sewer system relatively soon, and I hope they're planning on that one. I think that's $6 million or so for a new sewer. So I worry about the infrastructure currently on the island with the growth that they're planning on shoving down our throats. I said it. So I don't appreciate that, and I think that with the state telling us the mandates are unfunded mandates. When they say city, you know, years ago people voted the whole island as a city, Now the whole island is a city. So then when the state says the city has to grow by X amount, we're not Spokane, we're not Bremerton, we're not Seattle, we're not Tacoma, we're an island. I think we can get an exemption because we're an island. We have a single source water for aquifer. I never used the word aquifer so much in all my life until I started running for this position. But I learned a lot about aquifers, and I think the state needs to learn about aquifers too, single source aquifers. They just blanketed this legislation through like we're all cities. And we're not a city, we're an island. And we have limited resources, and I think we have to take care of the limited resources we have. It's not only the water, it's the environment, it's the trees, it's the sewer, it's the entire infrastructure, and again, it goes to planning, and I don't know where they are with that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Clarence?
You know, I was on a city council before this place was a city. I was elected to Tukwila City Council in 1987, and we started in '88. 2 years later, the state passed the Growth Management Act. Kind of like coming here, I go, I just got elected and we have to do this. Why did the Growth Management Act pass way back then? Because this state was tired of the sprawl. It was having impacts on quality of life, many of the environmental issues we're talking about because it was too spread out and not dense and being focused on saving resources locally. So the Growth Management Act requires every county and every state and municipality, whether it's an island city or anything else, we are a municipality. We must meet growth targets. And then the recent ones we're just talking about, oh, by the way, I tried to get rid of acronyms, so AMI means Area Median Income, of which is the average in your region, in this case, Kitsap County. You would find that average, it's about 100,000, and we're talking about 60% of that, so the 625 project would be people who make $65,000 or less. And you have to earn money, you just can't come in. And it's not homeless, and it's not low income. This is working people having a place to live. So back to your question, trying to get back to density, we have to meet these targets. It is law. House Bill 1220 now sets standards of you must meet how many units per these area median income targets. You must meet it for 65% and 40% and others. And you have to show where you're going to put those units. We don't have a choice in this matter. This is state law. We have to follow these provisions, or else we don't get qualified for other things that the state might provide. So these are things that are hard choices. And it's easy to say not doing it, but seriously, from the grown-up perspective, we have to. It is the law. And so that's the hard choices we're making. And these are the places that make sense. The highest density places that have the infrastructure that are close to the places you live and work. The Ferry District in particular has incredible potential for higher density developments. Right now it's just a bunch of parking lots. And it has sewer and water nearby, so those things are there. Close proximity to transit center. So these two places are the places, if you need to do density, make most sense.
Thank you. Lara?
That was good to you. Okay, so regarding increasing density in the Ferry and the high school zoning districts, for me, it's more of an order of operations approach. Until we know what our carrying capacity is for the sewer system, until we have the numbers for the infrastructure for supplying water, I mean, that's why we're talking about High School Road and the Ferry District, is because they currently do have sewer and city water. And that's great. It's appropriate to put more density in places where that infrastructure is already in place. The question is, what's the capacity for that? And also, what's the appetite for construction? Again, we just have to create capacity through zoning. We don't actually have to do the construction ourselves. And I just want to jump back to 625 real quick, because the 625 project and Harbor Square differ on one big point, and that is Harbor Square was a private development. Their skin in the game was their skin in the game. 625 is our skin in the game, and we want to see it done in a proper planned approach. So back to the order of operations. Once we do define what capacity we have, how do we want our city to look? Keep in mind that as you increase zoning, I don't know how many of you folks out here live in a single-family residence and you would love to downsize, but there's nowhere for you to go. It would be really nice to have a smaller place that you could actually move into, and then you can sell your home to a family, and boom, we now have places for people who have children who have grown and flown. They have a place to go and can still stay in their community. And again, keep in mind that any upzoning or rezoning of any sort is going to result in higher taxes for everybody in those zones. There's going to be a lot of money being made by certain either personal property owners or contractors, because once you create more capacity, more development potential, you can put more housing there that somebody's going to make a lot of money. So just keep that in your back pocket.
Joe?
Oh, thank you. Great question. Support density, high school district, ferry district. Well, first off, as we know, I think all of us know here that it has been long agreed to put the growth in Winslow. You know, Bainbridge is a city that acts like a county, but we have a town, Winslow, and it's been way past before my time and everyone's time here on this table that the growth is to go to Winslow. So where in Winslow? We're looking at the high school and ferry district, as Sarah pointed out. So why are we doing this? Again, this is where the growth is going to be in Winslow. We do need to, again, this is planning for growth. This is the Growth Management Act. We're not doing the growth, we're planning for the growth. It has to happen in Winslow if we want to have sensible growth. And why are we doing this? Is for environmental reasons. I'm sorry, you're making funny faces at me. So we need to plan for our workers do not have a place to live here. People are why is the traffic so bad coming on the island in the morning, coming off the island? Is because people who work here do not live here. We have to it's not just legal reasons. We need to make sure that people can live here to be a more sustainable community. We need that. So quickly, I'm not in favor of inclusionary zoning. I think that's a bad trade-off. Let's look at, as Sarah talked about, HDDP, the Affordable Housing Overlay Zone. I see Councilmember Quitzlin is in the audience. I think, John, you brought that up. I really like that. Density bonuses. Let's focus on affordable housing, bonuses, getting workers here, families, seniors who they can live here. People who are part of our community can live here. We need that to happen. Thank you.
Thank you. You brought up affordable housing seems to come up in various forms. Interesting, from my knowledge, the city has been talking about affordable housing for at least 10 years, okay? Some of the things that formal actions that the city has already taken. There was, in 2018, there was council mandated affordable housing task force recommendations. There's the multifamily property tax exemption. There's density bonuses. There's the HDDP, the Housing Design Demonstration Project. There's the Housing Trust Fund. And just in 2023, there was another council-approved housing action plan. Yet in a 2022 survey, National Community Survey, Bainbridge Island scored in the bottom 3% of availability of affordable housing. Given all these past actions, why the low score? Why is affordable housing still a big priority? What has worked and what hasn't worked over all this time? Clarence, you're up.
Sure. One of the problems is it's a wonderful place to live. These are market forces. People want to move here and they build beautiful homes, and that pushes up property values. That's a plus and a minus. It's good if you were here. For people who are on fixed incomes or mortgage, property rich, mortgage poor, property taxes are difficult. But that's one of the reasons why affordable housing is so difficult, because the land and the available places to put properties, you can't put those kind of properties that would be at a lower income accessibility. So that's the biggest problem. We just have a very expensive place to live and build. But I would say that all the tools you mentioned, Bill, I love all of them and we should use them all. And I would give a lot of credit to Housing Resources Bainbridge because they've been very creative. I mentioned what I'm doing on the Kitsap Housing Authority. We're doing 2 projects that are going to be affordable building projects, Southern Cross, and also a new project on Cave Avenue that are going to be lower income. And those are projects, by the way, a local islander put those monies forward. So there are things happening. We just have to be able to be creative and also realize that we have to find ways, and I don't know how to incentivize or other, but we must find ways to make properties more, when you build a property, incentivized to try to build those affordable units. We can do that by ordinances, or we can do that. And one final thing, we did an inventory of all of the what we call short-term rentals or Airbnb accessory dwelling units. And we licensed all of them because we wanted to get an idea of what the number is. It's around 150. And I'd like to sometime in the future look at what Port Townsend did and put a cap on those, because these are possible long-term rentals. They're available for long-term, they're just using it for short-term rentals for vacationers and the rest. And they're very valuable to keep people in their homes, but this is an income source and a place that you could infill close that could be something that would be a great tool for affordable housing.
Peter?
Thank you. They've been talking about affordable housing longer than 10 to 15 years. They've talked about it in 1994 when I moved here, that teachers couldn't afford to live here, firemen couldn't afford to live here. At that time, I bought our house for $210,000. We put $20,000 down. It was a $180,000 mortgage. Can't get that today. And prices, as Clarence mentioned, we live in an expensive community, and it keeps going up and up and up. All those ideas that they've done in the past were all good ideas. I think that Housing Resources Board is great. I would support them 100% in those projects. One thing I like to bring up, though, it's been mentioned that it's the law, we have to do it. It was once a law that women couldn't vote. That was a law. It was once a law that women couldn't have a credit card in their own name. It was once a law that African Americans only live in this one small spot. Laws are meant to change and challenge. Don't tell me that it's a law and we have to do it. I think we can get an exception, and we don't have to accept the laws that are written, especially in these days and times. So, thank you.
Joe?
Yeah, great question. Yes, what has worked, what has not worked? I'll tell you, a number of things have worked. When I was on the chair of the Kitsap Regional Coordinating Council last year, I worked with other leaders to implement pre-approved free accessory dwelling unit plans. We just voted for that on council just last session, so that is now available on Bainbridge Island. That will make a difference. It should, I hope. Also, this council, as Clarence knows, when the Department of Natural Resources raised the lease to the city for Eagle Harbor by 80% this year because the state's having budget problems. This council said, we are not raising the rates of the 13 very low income folks who live in as liveaboards. We kept that, so these liveaboards will not be priced off the island. We have supported Housing Resources Bainbridge in the terms of millions of dollars to do the work that they have done. We passed an ordinance which is called kind of the CHIP grant. It's a long acronym, sorry Clarence, but it's relating to the city can apply and get funding from the state for infrastructure funding for affordable housing projects, such as the Housing Resources Bainbridge Erickson Community Project. We got $480,000 to give to Housing Resources Bainbridge for them to complete their project for 18 permanent affordable housing units. So things have worked, but it has not been enough. As we know, we have, as a community, we've looked at the Suzuki project, if we remember that. Of course, 625 Winslow. These are projects that, of course, Suzuki did not work. I see a member of the audience here who was vehemently opposed to Suzuki when we were talking about Suzuki, and he said, let's go to Winslow. Now that we were talking about 65, he says, no, let's go back to Suzuki. So it's very convenient. It's very easy, as you're hearing a lot of no's. No, we can't do this, we can't do that. Folks, we have to adapt to a changing world. We have to adapt to a changing climate. And we have to have the courage, the political will, the people, the leaders have to have the political will to make this work happen. Thank you.
Yeah, Lara. Yeah.
Thank you. I think on Bainbridge Island, it's not just affordable housing that is lacking, but housing, period, is lacking. There's just not enough of it for the folks at any income level who are trying to come out here. Part of that is because we don't have the infrastructure. As was pointed out by Peter, when we incorporated in, 91, or rather the city of Winslow, Clarence is going to correct me, the city of Winslow annexed the rest of the island, we did become a city. But we are unlike other cities that we don't have infrastructure that extends across from corner to corner. Most of us have septic systems. Many of us have private wells. And we caretake for those ourselves. No one's helping us out with these, expensive infrastructure projects that get us into our homes. And I only point that out because if we did have a deeper infrastructure system in place, we would likely have more housing and more affordable housing. That being said, prices here are so high that many folks are turning their homes into either vacation homes or vacation rentals to support themselves. We do have a higher level of economic income here, so there's folks that have maybe 2 houses. And I think it's really time for the city to put in some bumpers on vacation rentals, while also acknowledging that we don't have short-term housing, because we do need short-term housing. We all have friends and family that come to visit. We all have reunions and graduations and weddings, and where are we going? We're going to the casino, I think, but even that, they get full. So there is a level of need in various levels of housing. Affordable housing, it's difficult because the infrastructure is not everywhere, but homes can be built in other locations.
Sarah?
Primarily, we've not been successful creating affordable housing because of money and funding sources and community opposition. And those play together a little bit because some of the funding sources, for example, the low-income housing tax credits that are going to be used for 625, the requirements of those funding sources require a large-scale development. They say 90 units to be competitive. And when you have a project of that scale proposed, you're more likely to have community opposition. And a similar situation happened with Suzuki's. When we went to look, how are we going to fund this? We had an organization like Lehigh come in and say, you're going to use low-income housing tax credits. You need to have at least 100 units. And it got out of scale for the site. And so even when property is free, I hear that, yes, land costs a lot, but even when property is free, 625, it's still $50 million. I think it's in the mid-fives per unit at 90 units, Peter, to build those. I've heard that Finch Green is looking at $600,000 a unit. So even when the land is free, it's the cost to build, and then restrictions on funding sources. I think that we do need to talk to the state, well, the county, about our particular allocation for the AMI levels for 1220. Because I hear comments I agree with about having diverse housing types for people to downsize to, but if they're not in that AMI level, we're not planning for them unless we're going to plan beyond our requirement. And so I think we need to reconsider and have that conversation with county about our allocation and whether the allocation we've received is appropriate for our needs. And we do know our sewer capacity. It's with 2 upgrades, there's 2,000 ERUs available. Probably some of those are gone since that number came out. And so then we do know that there's very little capacity beyond our 1220 allocation for 80% and below, plus existing capacity to connect to the sewer plant. And so that is a conversation that does need to occur because that's just going to be more additional costs that will be borne by construction.
Okay, thank you. Mike?
Since there's been a lot of lawyers giving legal advice, I want to give you the lawyer's perspective and tell you I 100% intend to comply with the law. So let me tell you about my approach and what the law requires. So my approach would be to design a program of subsidies under existing zoning that meets our legal obligations, and then I would determine the total cost. And I think this could include denser units, ADUs, single-family homes and larger units to attract families to the island, and then workforce housing, which I would want the city to own and manage so that you could prioritize those who actually work on Bainbridge Island. Now, again, you don't actually have to build it, you have to plan for it. Right? That's what the Growth Management Act requires. And actually, so once we determine the contours of the program and the total cost, I would document it in the comprehensive plan under the requirement to document, quote unquote, programs and actions needed to achieve housing availability, including gaps in local funding. And that's a very important phrase, gaps in local funding, right? And that is actually supported by Commerce Guidance, which is book 2 of updating the housing element, page 60, which mentions the capital cost to build new housing development, operational costs, and infrastructure costs, and notes that available federal, state, and local funding are currently insufficient to support construction of enough homes to meet the needs of all low, very low, and extremely low-income households. So they know that there's not enough funding for it, and they know there's a gap in local funding, and it's not realistic for us to be able to pay for it ourselves. If you extrapolate the 500 and something thousand per unit for 625, it would cost about $600 million for us to build the amount of affordable housing we've been allocated. And so, now I'm also an honest lawyer, and I want to be straight with you. There is tension in, yeah, funny, right? There's tension in the case law, okay, because there was also this case about Mercer Island's comprehensive plan, which came out a week before the Kitsap County case. And that one said, not only do you have to plan for and accommodate it, but you also have to guarantee it gets built. And if that is the state of the law, then 1220 is an unfunded mandate. But there is an unfunded mandate statute that says it's illegal unless the state reimburses you. So if that's the state of the law, the state needs to reimburse us.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. What I'd like to ask one more question, and then we'll turn it over to all of you to have any questions. So we're here at the Senior Center, and as you can tell, we're bursting at the seams. Every year, it's harder and harder for us to meet the growing demand for more programs and services. As our membership grows, we're approaching 2,500 members. Very high percentage of seniors in this community. We're now involved in a pretty intensive capital campaign effort to build a new facility for the whole community. Up to this point, the city and the council has been very supportive. They've helped us through the review and process with the city very easily. But yet, the capital campaign is a huge challenge. Just wonder, what more can the council do to help us achieve our goal? Remember that this facility will be turned over to the city once it's constructed. It's going to be a community city facility. We're asking for what the next steps would be from the council. Lara, we're going to start with you.
So this is a great question. So what else can be done that hasn't been done? And I guess shame on council for not figuring this out or before the question came up. That's not fair. That was just kind of an aside. What else can what else can council do to help with the capital campaign, to get the funds together, to make new construction happen to a facility that will be a senior and community center for the entire island? So it's a city project. It's another city project. And I would think that we can devote just as much energy to creating this as we have for other city construction. Being a little more creative about how planning and permitting and timelines work, I think, is something that the city has some flexibility to offer and likely is already offering right now as far as plan review and permit review. I would consider a facility like this to be another support for social services that the city does have a bandwidth to provide. You know, if we can provide monies for things like the Boys and Girls Club, Helpline House, a variety of other programs, I think that this project would certainly qualify for that kind of support. So I would start looking at those funding sources and also seeing what the city can do as far as easing permitting and review costs.
Joe?
Great. This Senior Center is a real jewel for the community, and I should probably start attending some services here, so because I certainly qualify. 2,500 members, at least that. So Yes, the council, Bill, as you said, we have been very supportive. I can't think of where we have not been supportive because we greatly value this jewel in the community. In fact, we agreed to expand the footprint of what this currently is in this park. So that was a big give by this council saying, yes, you can do that. I'm not aware of there being any problems with the capital campaign, so if that is, that's news to me. This is frankly the first time I've heard, is there a problem? This maybe not be come to us and say we're having a problem, what can we do? Because we're very, very supportive. So you're asking, off the top of my head, I'm just thinking, because of the federal grant situation, we may be doing less projects because of the Trump administration's putting restrictions on federal grants that the city must comply with immigration, customs enforcement, federal action on Bainbridge Island for us to enforce attacking innocent people in this community. I think it's going to be a fair say. This council members that's a hard no. So let's just project here. There's going to be maybe less federal projects, federal funded projects that's going to happen on this island. That may free up some staff time. So off the top of my head, Bill, I'd say maybe some staff can provide some services for this project. Funding is tight. Funding is very tight. We're in uncharted times economically. The city's in excellent financial shape, but I would say maybe some staff. We can have some engineers can help out. So, but I would say if there's an issue, please come to us and let's talk about it. That's how we do it. This council has been very, very consistently supportive of the senior center. Thank you.
Yeah. Mike, what's up?
Well, Well, I would just say that I'm obviously very supportive of the senior center, and I would just, rather than making any sort of grand promises or offering, granular details of how exactly I'd help, I think the best next steps is let's sit down so I can better understand the situation, and we could talk about how I can help.
Okay. Sarah?
I think the city should reconsider its policy about how they deal with development fees and infrastructure costs for properties that do eventually become city assets. The Friends of the Farm asked to not have to pay the permit fees to redo the roof on the Suimatsu farmhouse, and the city declined that, even though it's a city asset. So I think that's one thing the city could do, because it will eventually become the city's. It would be hard, I think, for the city to help with funding, because I don't know that the city has assisted other organizations like the Rowing Center or BPA with funding for their projects, and I think it would be hard to make a case why the senior center would be treated different. I do think that the city should explore, are there any efficiencies to be gained if the city were to move ahead with building affordable housing on the site at the same time as separate buildings? Are there any efficiencies to be gained from doing construction at the same time? Would that unlock other funding or grant opportunities? So I think the city needs to be a partner in exploring how they can assist, but I don't know that the senior center should count on actual funding other than maybe the waiver of permit and fees and utility connections.
Okay, thanks. Peter?
Music to my ears is fundraising and capital campaigns. Since I've been fundraising for 40 years, there's nothing better than I love to talk about than raising money. And we are fortunate to live in this community that is filled with philanthropic people. Some are right here in the room. I won't look at any, but there are several here. So yes, the city can help with the permitting and excusing the permits and things like that. But I think that, and you have to have a plan. So there you go, Reed. I know we talked a couple months ago. If you have a capital campaign committee, capital campaign plan, a development plan, then it will work. I mean, how much money do you need to raise? And then we divided out how many people we need for each ask, and then we could raise the money. Didn't worry about Helpline House. I didn't worry about BEMA. I didn't worry about BPA. I'm not worried about the senior center. As Joe mentioned, it is a jewel to our community. We do own it. We have a growing population that is getting older, as the world is. and we need places for them to be, to gather, to provide services for. So it's critically important, but I think that we're lucky enough to have a community that supports such projects and such jewels, because we have plenty of jewels in this crown. Thank you.
All right, Clarence?
I've been a member of this center for at least 15 years. When I turned 55, we realized I didn't have an age limit, or age in there, so I'm going to be 70 this year. And I right now am happy to be the city council liaison to the senior center board, and I come to the Wednesday meetings. And congratulations on the work. Many of you maybe don't know, they've already got a great campaign together. You've got a great consultant. You've come up with a very targeted campaign plan. I mean, you're on your way. I think it's really exciting that you're doing that. And it will be not just seniors. This is a community center. You're already doing programs. You can see it through the Splash newsletter of all the different offerings that are here, not just for gray hairs or people with less hair like me. They're for everybody in the community. But I want to jump to one other thing. We forget to talk about, when we talk about 625 Winslow, it's also for people of limited income and seniors. And many of you in this room may be in that situation where you already own your property, but your income is not keeping up with your property taxes, so where are you going to go? These kind of facilities, these kind of incomes, it's income, it's not just workforce, it's income. And so this could be also an opportunity for our aging population to have a place to land and still be viable people in our community.
Okay, thank you. I think we'll open it up to the audience now. Reed will come around with a microphone, and we'd appreciate it if your questions are brief and not really address issues that the council members have already, the candidates have already mentioned. So, Reed, his hands up.
Good afternoon. No one has yet addressed the issue of public safety, and very specifically to the two candidates who support the 625 project. Please let me know what kind of public safety studies have either been conducted or are planned to be conducted, given the state of that intersection at the highway in Winslow. Thank you.
So to understand the question, you're worrying about traffic safety, or are you concerned about individuals who may live there that might have some issues? Which I mean, yes. Is it both? Okay.
Member of the Ferry Zone community.
Right, yeah. Well, one, and I don't want to get into a confrontation, but one of the things that's really, I've lived here almost 30 years now, and some of the comments that are coming out, it really, it's things that I don't think at least reflect my Bainbridge values. And they actually write their names to this. One individual said, we've worked hard, we worked hard all our life, we have our dream property, waterfront property, but if you don't make enough money, then you probably don't belong here. That's been said. That's been said that this project will increase homelessness, it'll be social services, that there'll be crime, and I think that's a really awful stereotype of those who make lesser money. These are working people. These are people who are already part of our community. As Joe mentioned, we did a survey, 78% of the people who work here don't live here. 3/4 of our own city staff don't live here. Same with the fire department, which is another different agency, Peter, so they'll have to work with the fire truck. But, and there's a lot of, that's a real problem, and we pay well. So this is not reflective of our community. We need to have these people be part of our community, but there's also on those two, and I'm big on public safety. I'll get back to that, the roads in a minute, but I believe in public safety, and we need personnel here. And should there be that terrible situation where we have a major calamity and the Agate Pass Bridge is broken or the ferry's broken, and our 75% of our staff, both the fire department and ours, don't live here, they go on 24-hour shifts. Ours are on 12-hour shifts. They can't work forever. How are they going to get here? And how are our workers doing in where they live? Now, Bainbridge Repairs has a really good idea because we have a lot of wonderful boats here. So they have a little mosquito emergency fleet. Let's hope that can work. But that is a true reality that is something that we have to do as elected officials, let alone the businesses. And when you when you have people who can't live here, I mean, work here, don't live here, we're not having a very inclusive community for ages and for supporting our school district. We need to have all of that, and we find ways to do that.
Joe, you,
Yeah, okay, I think
and again, we'd like to keep it within the 2 minutes, okay, in the
Okay,
responses.
2 minutes, okay. Well, thank you for the question. I take it's somewhat broad, so I'll give kind of a broad answer on various safety issues. There have been questions relating to this site regarding air quality. I serve on the Puget Sound Clean Air Advisory Council, and I reached out to that agency. This is the agency in our region that determines what is the status of the air quality. And so I reached out to them, and they gave us the data I shared. Hopefully folks have seen this, that the air quality at that site is good. So we do not have an air quality issue at 625 Winslow. So there's one safety issue. If we wanted to talk about, I don't know, increase in crime, if that's a safety issue, studies have shown, there's maybe a perception, perhaps, affordable housing means increase of crime, lower property values. Actually, the contrary is true. When you do affordable housing, crime goes down in the neighborhood. Crime goes down. Safety is increased with affordable housing projects. Property values go up when you have affordable housing projects. So we need to sort of think through some of our perhaps assumptions, and frankly, some of it maybe I held, but once you start looking into it, affordable housing actually adds to a community, to its safety, to the value to the community. So I'm sort of, I don't really see a safety issue, but let's just say, I think a question we need to have as a community is not how do we find ways to prohibit people from moving here to maintain our social composition. But let's find ways to include people and make sure that the folks of us who live here now are not adversely impacted. Let's have that conversation to how to include people and we all gain. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions?
Right, you got a question?
So I think many or most
Close.
of the candidates who are not council members, they brought up the process and planning and studies and asked for those things to be completed before we moved on with other things. So I'm wondering how you on the council would like to respond to those, because I didn't hear anything.
So we just quickly go through maybe each, if you want to. Sarah, why don't we start with?
Okay. I'm sorry, I would be gratified to get some clarification. The suggestion is maybe we're not following process on our land use. I'm sorry, I need to understand.
So I believe, excuse me if I'm wrong, but Mike, you certainly talked about process and completing studies. Lara, you too. How do you guys respond to that?
In other words, should we wait to do things until these studies are complete so we know that there's capacity?
Okay, great.
Is that?
Do you want me to?
Well,
So he directed it to members of the council, of which there are two of you.
okay. Well, let's see. That, okay, we are, sorry, I have to collect my thoughts because it was talk that we're not following process. And I would say, in many ways, we've been working, say, if we want to talk about 65, it seems to be that's the direction. We've been working on that project for 3 years of a long process. So 3 years, and we have a lot of information available on the city's website. So that is available. Now, in terms of some process, like do we do the comp plan first or the groundwater management plan first? Well, that's a great example. I'm totally in favor of doing the groundwater. Let's get our groundwater management plan done before we do the comprehensive plan. So definitely agree. That only makes sense. Trying to think some of your other specific questions. Again, 625 is very much up in the air, folks. I mean, there's a SEPA appeal. probably, I don't know what Lehigh's doing with the housing trust funds application, but let's just say that let's use this appeal process to get more information that perhaps we did not have. More information is preferable to less. And then did we have suitable information to make that, was that determination done in good faith? So trying to think of, is there anything else that I'm not answering for your process question?
Do you think these projects should have gone forward without having completed the groundwater study and the comp plan? Answer that.
Okay. Well, I will answer that. Do we need affordable housing or not? Okay. So, but for us to say no, to wait for the perfect opportunity, we are doing the comprehensive plan. Frankly, if it wasn't for HB 1220, that comp plan would have been, I think Sarah would agree, that would have been done long ago, but that's not our reality. We're a year, Bainbridge Island, God bless us, we're a year behind. Is that my, oh, is that it? Okay, sorry.
You had your,
Mid.
well, I think,
it was the.
yeah.
You wanted both council members, right? Did you? Right. Okay. Yeah. Dovetailing on my colleague Joe Deets, I wish the comp plan had been quicker. The draft environmental impact statement took longer than I thought it would, and I really agree with the council, the planning commissioners. They've carried a lot more of a load than we have, and so that's a problem. But one of the things that makes our comp, we're one of the few cities that haven't done it. This was due last December, so we're behind at what's state mandated. But one of the reasons why, it's actually a reflection of our community. We have engaged people like you so that there's extra hearings that are brought in. There are more people brought in. There's experts that are asked to brought in, more studies. So part of the process is trying to meet the demand of what the public wants to have looked at, which other communities aren't so engaged. So that's a good thing, and it's a part of that makes the process longer. The other one was, oh yeah, we just got the peer review. We have the groundwater management plan. And the city had paid for a group of scientific experts to look it over. It's called a peer review, and that's just been completed. I haven't had a chance to really dig into it, but now we have at least something. And I wanted to wait till the peer review because there's a lot of talk tonight and other places of what it is and how much capacity is. And depending on who you talk to, we're going to run out of water tomorrow, or we have good for 50 years. At least this peer review is going to say, what's your groundwater study like? Are you hitting your targets? Does it have really manageable performance standards? Is it doing good assumptions? People can interpret it the way I want. I want to see what these people say our study has done. And let's see what there's positive things and perhaps shortcomings we have to do better on. But in terms of your question, it was November 8th, 23 years ago on my birthday when we started this project. And to answer your question, it'd be nice to know, but the capacity for this unit, even if it was built today, we still have more than enough capacity for this. And I want to add one other thing on growth. You'll hear a lot of things where all these units, we're not going to have the population like tomorrow. We're not going to move in and 10,000 people are going to be here. We haven't grown, we've only grown 4,000 people in the last 20 years with current zoning. So just because you zone it doesn't mean it's going to happen overnight.
yeah.
It's my understanding that since we are a single source aquifer, that we are not required to develop at a rate that we are being told we need to develop. And I would like to see the city council push back because quite frankly, the quality of life on this island in terms of trying to get a medical appointment, use our highways, go to our 2 markets, none of it is affordable. And the fact of the matter is, if we run out of water, we certainly aren't going to have affordable housing. And I think that the City Council really needs to push back on this requirement, first looking at the aquifer situation, which we're not obligated to grow at the rate they're suggesting, and then look at our road network, our medical network, and our facilities on this island so that we are left with some quality of life.
Mike, who wants it?
I would clarify something. So There's a couple bills at issue. There's HB 1220 and there's HB 1110. And 1220 is this requirement that you build affordable housing for different segments of the population, or housing affordable to different segments of the population. We are not exempt from that bill based on our sole source aquifer. However, there was a bill, HB 1110, which is this middle housing bill, which basically took single-family zoned houses and automatically rezoned them to duplexes, fourplexes, and sixplexes based off of the size of the city and proximity to transit. We were explicitly exempt from that bill based off of our sole source aquifer status. And then there's another bill out there on ADUs that increases the required amount of ADUs from 1 per lot to 2 per lot. We're exempt because the entire island is a critical recharge area. So we're exempt from some things, but not all of them. But I think to your point, it's a missed opportunity, because if you look at when HB 1110 is being considered by the legislature, you actually had this wonderful letter from Blair King talking about all the limits that we had around water, and we lobbied the state to get that exemption. And so, in my view, I think there's a legislative fix that needs to be made. And I think that we do need to talk to Senator Hansen and our representatives to get a legislative fix and have us exempt from 1222.
Any other questions?
I'll jump. I just.
So Mr. Nelson is right. We are not exempt from 1220. And I think that Kirsten Hytopoulos, Councilmember Hytopoulos, deserves credit. She actually drafted that letter, and she deserves credit for doing that. I think one of the issues is it was very clear, House Bill 1110, what the impact was going to be. I don't think it was as clear with 1220 until we got to the point where we were applying it and trying to comply with it. And when it was passed, we also did not, our numbers had not been allocated to us, so we didn't know what we were going to have to be planning for. And I think now, 10 months into it, and to be clear, the Planning Commission did not receive the comp plan until after it was due. It's clear that the numbers are not attainable, so we're planning for unattainable numbers. Just for 80% and below, 1,139 units, that's 60 units a year over 20 years. I did the math at $500,000 a unit, and it's a $28.5 million investment per year to build those units. It's not attainable, and it's not specific to our community's needs. And so I think what we need to be looking for, again, is not to get out from under the responsibility, because I do think we have a moral responsibility, whether it's a legal mandate or not, to plan for different levels of affordable housing. I think the number we've been asked to plan for is not realistic. It's not based on anything specific to our community. And I think that's what we need to be seeking, is a fix that allows us, one, flexibility in how we comply, because the guidance from Commerce, again, is kind of a uniform plan for a uniform city, which we're not. And I think we need to be able to revisit our allocation, because of our limited resources, our limited infrastructure, concerns about our carrying capacity. When we have to allocate all of those resources, all of the capacity we think we could manage, if it's for, say, 50% and below, then we are leaving out opportunities to plan for middle-income housing, cottage courts, smaller homes people can downsize to or start in. It really focuses us on one type of housing for one segment of the population, and I don't know that that's what's best for the community.
No, excellent points, both of you. Thank you. We already had a test case. We're always compared to Mercer Island. You know, we have a lot of things in common. We're both island cities. Our populations are pretty similar. Our income levels are pretty similar. A couple differences there is they have freeways, so their growth is pretty quick and easy. We have the ferry, so it's a much slower growth possibility. But they also have a benefit. They're much more urbanized than us, you know, because they're about a third of our size and landmass. And as Joe mentioned, we are more like a county. We have 85% of our land on Bainbridge Island is not developed. 85%. That's a carbon capture target that is the envy of any other city anywhere close to our size. But it means that we have very limited areas to grow. That's the challenge. And when the Mercer Island decision came down, when they tried to meet the goals of 1220, the Growth Management Board rejected it and threw it back, and that's when a decision came. You have to not only plan for these units, but you have to have a way to show how they're going to be financed, which made my heart stop, because I don't know how we do that. I mean, here we are just trying to get these few projects, and Housing Resources Bainbridge is doing the Erickson project and all the hoops they went through, and that was a lot of donated support and other support, and that barely made it. So this is when you want to talk about challenges for this next term, that's one is going to face any of us who's going to be on this council. We have to meet the law, and I hope that someone challenges that Growth Management Act decision. I'm sure Mercer Island is. I don't know what their potential for success is. I hope they are successful, because if they are, we have a lot more breathing room. But with that determination, they just threw one more layer that nobody had expected to be planning for.
And I'll just piggyback on those comments just to say that it's all very clear that we don't know enough yet to go forward. And we have a time mandate to respond to the Growth Management Act. We can all agree, I think, that there's confusion surrounding how we are supposed to comply and fulfill the requirements. There's confusion around how to implement even things like this House Bill 1220. For example, there is no system in place yet, to my knowledge, either through HRB or through council directives, to organize income-specific tenants. Just at last week's City Council meeting, HRB came before City Council to request that we raise the income level, the income limits, because they are not able to fill the units at the Oliver. And so they wanted to actually have us raise it. That would take a council decision to actually do that, because the applicants that were applying for housing at the Oliver made too much money. So if we can't even get people into the Oliver right now, and we are supposed to be planning for people who have much less income levels, for example, with possibly through the 625 project, how are we organizing this? I just don't feel that there is a plan in place that addresses specifically Bainbridge Island, specifically our financial and construction setup, but we certainly don't have a plan that makes sense yet.
We have time for one or two more questions.
Can I say something about that? That was Edie. Thank you for the question. I think the question is things aren't affordable. How can
There's a question here. Thank you.
I'm sorry. Oh, okay. We'll talk privately. How's that?
Joe and others, you said earlier that you would like other suggestions for locations. I would like to suggest the Sakai property. It is owned by the municipal parks, also owned by us, the Bainbridge Island residents. I think the City Council and the Parks Department should negotiate a trade and turn that area into a lovely opening park as people arrive on our island. The troll could be moved there. We would have more room for parking, walking distance to the schools, etc. So I'm interested in opinions.
Okay. Is it okay?
Yeah, we just maybe
Okay,
quick,
yeah,
we are running out of time.
I welcome
so.
all ideas. In fact, I remember actually hearing that, and a couple of years ago, thank you for the question, I think Sakai is a very good location, and if I recall, a few years ago, I reached out to the parks, and there was some covenants that they had that made this problematic, but let's just say, let's revisit that, because let's like leave no stone unturned. So again, what I would like to do is a community conversation about where can these projects go, and saying no is not on the table. We have to actually start as a collective, make some decisions on where we can put these projects. So I think I'll leave it at that.
And I hope
There's one more question here, Reed.
Okay.
So every year the 305 gets more jammed up, and we see traffic jams now that stretch way past the casino every day, every morning, people trying to get to their jobs here. That's part of the worker housing. But for those people for those candidates who oppose the 625 project, would you be amenable to dedicating the 625 property or a portion of that property to a future light rail station?
I'll jump in real quick on that one. I think that planning forward is smart planning, and so at least looking at that as an option and thinking there will be a point in time when, of course, the Agate Pass Bridge and, as we saw with the Head of the Bay project, that was a test case for what it's going to look like if the one-way off, one-way on scenario plays out. So how is it better transportation options, how will they appear? Well, we have to create them. And you could not pick a better spot if one was to have a light rail station right next to the ferry that would zip right down. I mean, this topic has come up a couple of times with some different folks, and I believe WashDOT has expressed a little interest in this as well as a transportation hub. And in the meantime, again, if 625 is paused, and as I understand it, the application for financing actually was submitted already, but even though it was incomplete. But there is something called interim zoning, where you can basically take that corner, both those places, don't demolish the existing structure that is on Olympic Drive. Keep that, use that as an interim until the city really understands what they want to use that corner for. Use that house as either a visitor center, certainly public bathrooms, create some kind of a park-like area right there, maybe a space for food trucks or something. FIFA is coming next year. I mean, there's so much opportunity in an interim sense. We don't just have to make a paved space and stare at it and consider it, not worthy. There's lots we can do. But certainly having that as a hub for light rail, I think is worthy of a lot of consideration. Would you like that?
I want to jump on this, please. I was employee number 40 at Sound Transit in 1997, and that's how I got to here. Well, the ferry got me to Bainbridge, but that's what brought me here to this region. And these are incredibly expensive projects, between $50 to $250 million a mile, depending on how it is built, what's going to be in a tunnel, elevated. The elevated is among the most expensive. And the reason why you have light rail is you have incredibly dense population areas where people need to go, want to go, and you have to have that usage. You have to have that ridership. We don't have that ridership for our buses. And I'm also on the board of commissioner on Kitsap Transit, trying to get people just to use the buses. And so a light rail system, there was a person who talked about elevated maglev, 25 years ago. I mean, with all due respect, it really just is not a sensible, practical idea. And I'll tell you what, if we had those kind of billions of dollars for that transit system, I can figure out a whole lot of ways we could build so much affordable housing with $1 billion, trust me. So that's just simply a project that would never happen on this island. And if it did, you don't want to live here anymore, because now it's so dense that you need that light rail.
Okay.
Joe, quickly, and then
Yeah, I'll be really quick. Okay, Kevin, thanks for the question. I just want to say, remember who we're dealing with is WashDOT. This is the same state agency that wants that roundabout by, high school and 305, which none of us want. So also, and how is that intersection going, that WashDOT controlled intersection of 305 and Winslow Way? It's terrible. Okay, so and mind you, anything like this, you're talking 20 years ahead, Kevin. Look at what they're doing in Seattle. They're nowhere near completing all their light rail, which they badly need. So, nice idea, but, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I was employee number 100 at BART, San Francisco. That project got built in 10 years, a little bit over budget, but they built 75 miles and incredibly changed the makeup of downtown San Francisco, because you could live in Concord and get to San Francisco at a well-known time, 45 minutes.
Okay. So I'd like now, we have time for, how about 3 minutes of closing statements, okay? And we'll reverse the order than we started. So Lara?
All righty. Well, thank you very much for showing up here today. I know the Mariners are going to be happening soon, so We know we'll keep it short and sweet. So again, thank you for coming up here today and for listening to all of these different opinions from all of the candidates. I will close with, I think that there's pressing issues on the island, as noted, between housing, transportation, infrastructure, government mandates, to name a few. We haven't even talked about things like social services, interagency cooperation. Fire and the school district both have levies on the ballot right now. How do we support those groups as a taxing agency? Or there's a lot of money that we are, as taxpayers, are giving out, and we really want to understand that it's being used wisely. I do think that with the political climate on the federal level, which is trickling down to the states and local government, we really need to be conservative and cautious and thoughtful with our next couple years at the very least. I don't want to bite off big projects that we can't complete. I think that we would have much more success from everything from non-motorized transportation, for example, chewing off small projects that provide neighborhood support and effect. Really looking at our roads and thinking about ways to make them safer that don't necessarily cost a lot of money. Ways to slow down traffic to increase safety, not just for residents, but for bicyclists, pedestrians as well. All of those things, we can fine tune what we have. We don't have to keep creating more and more and more, and then rush to try and fix something later. For example, City Council provided an emergency $30,000 to Helpline, which was terrific. But I would love to think that we could have planned for that ahead of time, because we knew what was happening. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's many other social services, again, like, for example, Boys and Girls Club, childcare, elder care, all of those systems which are maybe not going to be supported as they have in the past. We need to fill the gap. And what are we willing to not do in order to fill the gap? So these are things that going forward, I personally would support thoughtful, slowed down decision making, and really understand what we're embarking before we commit to anything. Thank you very much.
Joe.
Great, thank you. Good to see everybody. Thank you for coming. Unless I get cut off, go Mariners. Okay. I did not wear my Mariners regalia because last time we lost. So, yeah, wonderful to be here. This is a great forum. Thank you all for coming. I think my closing statement, I want to focus on experience because I think experience is a relevant issue in this race. Sometimes people glibly talk about, establishment politics or establishment politicians. I propose that experience is wisdom and that we need this now more than ever at the city leadership level. I have, my first couple years on council, frankly, I was learning the ropes. That is no longer the case. I am highly effective. How is that? Because I know people in the city, I know people on the island, the county, the region, the state, the federal level. I know who to contact to get things done. And more important even, they know to contact me. I'm intimately familiar with the issues of affordable housing, comp plan, climate change. I know what the people of Bainbridge Island are thinking because I have office hours since I was first elected, regularly meeting people, listening to people, talking with them. So, it really pays off to have an experienced, dedicated, driven council member. So, quick example is, Laura, thank you for bringing up the Helpline House. That came from me. This is where experience pays off. Folks, because as soon as I heard that Helpline House is having a tough time because of these massive cutbacks by the Trump administration, I knew exactly what to do. I know our budget situation to the city. I know Helpline House. I know Maria Metzler. We talked. We came up with very quickly an action plan, $30,000. That was agreed. What I thought the city can afford would make a difference for Helpline House. I quickly made a proposal to the city. We're voting on that on the 28th. Clarence, I hope you're a yes. I know, thank you. So what I want to say is this is an example of what an experienced council member can do. In this case, helping make sure that islanders don't go hungry. And this is the reality that we're in. So climate change, unfortunately, I'm sorry, there was not one question asked about climate. Our climate is changing, and I believe it's the city's responsibility to find ways for the community to adapt. And that includes water. I'm very strong on I was a council member who proposed, let's initiate water conservation measures. I mean, we've monitored it, measured it. We're talking about reusing it. Let's talk about water conservation. That was this council member who was doing that. On affordable housing, when 625 Winslow, there was a lot of issues with that and good questions. It was this council member who went to those options, to those business owners at 251 Winslow, at the Pavilion. It was me who had private conversations with folks. So, folks, this is where an experienced council member pays off for you. So I'm asking, please support me for a third term because I will work hard for you. Thank you.
Peter.
Thank you all for inviting me here. Thank you for attending. Thank you for your time and attention. Mark Twain said there are 2 days that are most important in a person's life: the day you are born and the day you figure out why. I was born to serve my community, whether it's raising money for nonprofit organizations or to serve you as your next city council member for the Central Ward. I stand for transparency, accountability, and reliability. I believe our island is precious and beautiful, and we need to make sure we care about our environment, the water, and the impact we create to preserve it. I believe everyone should have a home and a safe place to live. We need safe roads for bicyclists and pedestrians. We need to be creative and open-minded about transportation, housing alternatives, and collaboration. I'll repeat, Project 625. Yes, I am a supporter of affordable housing. No, I am not in favor of Lehigh having anything to do with it. If you're a tenant and you would complain, you have a fear of eviction. If you're an employee and you complain, you have fear of getting fired. If you're a community member and you complain about things that you're concerned about, you're called a NIMBY. I'm not a NIMBY, and I'm offended by anybody who calls me a NIMBY. I care about people living in a well-maintained building with quality building materials. There are other factors in this decision which we mentioned earlier, and if you come tomorrow at the library, I'm sure we're going to go into depth with HRB hosting another event. I will listen to you. When you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. And people ask me, Peter, what do you stand for? Simply, I stand for you, and I'm grateful and appreciate your vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Clarence.
Thanks so much. And really, thanks for all of you turning out. It's so wonderful to see a lot of faces and new faces, and that's really great. You know, one of the best things I did 30 years ago was move here. And for a lot of the reasons all of you did, the beautiful environment, great schools, welcoming community. And ever since then, for these last almost 30 years, it's been my privilege to be involved in this community. I was part of the Marge Williams Center and the Friends of Pritchard Park, to starting the Japanese American Exclusion Memorial, becoming a National Historic Site, and a whole bunch of other nonprofit organizations that I've dedicated years to on this island. And because of that, the Chamber of Commerce gave me a surprise award and named me Citizen of the Year because of all that work. But that's really a recognition of getting to know all the people I got to work with that are making this community great. That's the really strength of our community. And now, this last 4 years, it's been my privilege to give back to you as one of your city council members. And it's really been the truest privilege of my life because it's really had a lot of different impacts that is going to change our future, including the head of the Bay, of which I want to make a quick comment on. You know, it was a problem of 4 months of delay, but that was a stream. Cooper Creek was a stream that had been open for 10,000 years until us immigrants came along and put a 30-inch culvert in there. And now we have this already changing the estuary. You know, the Suquamish people have been waiting for like 125 years for this to come back. That's when we talk about this land acknowledgement at every one of our meetings. This, at least for my 3.5 years, one of the first things we've subsequently done to actually honor that land acknowledgement by bringing this life back to the stream that had been theirs for millennia. So those are the kind of projects I really want to focus on. I mentioned that. And I want to make sure that we continue to be this welcoming community that we keep talking about. I think that what I'm going to be dedicated to, I believe in public safety, as I mentioned. I believe in equity. Of course, I talked a lot about fiscal responsibility because that's how things get done here. You got to make sure that you have the funds and the resources to do all of the projects and programs you want. And I want to also invest in the kind of programs in the community that sustain and help our community grow. And I think together we can make this place more inclusive and we can have a more sustainable future. One that looks back at our history but also honors and uplifts future generations, of which we need here. We need younger families to keep our vibrancy alive. The school district's lost hundreds and hundreds of students the last several years. That's real jobs, and they're our largest employer. It has a lot of impact. And we can't be an island that, by the way, we're 55 years of average. That's 10 years average more than the state average and about 12 more than the Kitsap County average. That's not a sustainable path for a growing, vibrant community. You need younger generations to bring that to it. You need their students to go into the school. And if we had the affordable housing, a lot of these places could stay open later that we would enjoy. So I appreciate, and it's been an honor to be your servant on the city council, and I'd love to have a second term.
Thank you for having me. So from the start, my campaign has stood against massive growth and massive upzoning. Instead, I stand for reasonable growth and responsible growth planning. My campaign has also stood for protection of our finite water resources. If elected to the City Council, my policy goals would be as follows. No massive growth, no massive upzoning, protect the special character of the island, don't overwhelm our water supply, infrastructure, and roads, create affordable housing and workforce housing, don't raise local taxes, and encourage families to move to the island. I think the big issues are water and housing. Again, Bainbridge Island's designated as a sole source aquifer and gets all of its drinking water from groundwater. Current policy requires that our water resources remain adequate and affordable for the indefinite future. And yet again, our groundwater aquifers are experiencing net drawdown now. In addition, modeling studies show significant net drawdown moving forward. That is an unsustainable path, and we need to course correct now. Again, on housing, my approach is to seek to comply with our legal obligations while keeping our overall growth numbers low as possible to respect the finite nature of our water supply. So again, no changes to our current zoning. I'd reject market rate upzoning, inclusionary zoning, and affordable housing overlay, and I would focus on subsidies. But I would reject local tax increases and instead seek reimbursement from the state. So my approach would be design a program of subsidies under existing zoning, and then I would determine the total cost. I would look at subsidizing denser units, ADUs, potentially single-family homes, and larger units to attract families to the island, and then workforce housing. And for workforce housing, I would focus on the city owning and managing the properties, which would give us the ability to give a preference to those that work on Bainbridge Island. Again, once we do this and we determine the cost, we would document it as programs and actions needed to achieve housing availability, including gaps in local funding, pursuant to RCW 70A070 2D2. This approach is supported by statute, commerce guidance, and recent case law out of the Growth Management Hearings Board, the Kitsap County case, which is actually 1 week newer than the Mercer Island case, which anyone who went to law school knows that means it actually overrules the portions that are inconsistent. But recognizing the tension in the Mercer Island case, that there's this idea that we might also be required to guarantee it gets built, again, that would make HB 1220 an unfunded mandate. So I would dot my I's and cross my T's, and I would also seek reimbursement. Right? And that's a simple, there's a simple unfunded mandate statute, RCW 43-135-060, and the mechanism is pretty simple. You file a petition with the Office of Financial Management, and this is not a novel legal theory. There's a lot of case law using that statute. So while I believe it's laudable for the state to want to increase the supply of affordable housing, it's not fair to put the financial burden of this unfunded mandate on local communities. I also think we should do a legislative fix, a sole source aquifer exemption to 1220. Vote Mike Nelson to keep Bainbridge, Bainbridge. Thank you.
I want to go back to your first question about the biggest challenge. In my response that I thought it was council procedure. Because hearing a lot of the questions today and the responses, they all tie together. Why are we working on the comprehensive plan before the groundwater management plan is complete? Why is 625 being proposed prior to the comprehensive plan being completed? And I think this all goes back to process. And I think the problem is that the city council has basically been put in the back seat. And I see Ron Peltier here. He and I served on council together, and I think about all the subcommittees we served on, talking about tree regulations, subdivision ordinances. I'm not sure if you were on the steering committee for the last comp plan update. We had a steering committee this go round, but the city council handcuffed us so we could only talk about public engagement, not about the substance of the plan. And I think that I heard a comment that one of the reasons the plan is taking so long is because of all the public engagement we have to do. And that's not true. The plan is taking so long because there was no policy direction given when it was started, which is the council's job. And they were deprived of that, but they let it happen. Especially this, with this update, with this new House Bill 1220 mandate, it was critical that policy direction be given to staff and the consultants of how were we going to comply. And that didn't happen, and we're almost now $800,000 to our consultant for the production of a draft environmental impact statement and alternatives that, in my opinion, are worthless. The goal should have been to create draft alternatives that were as close as we could get to an adoptable plan prior to receiving public input. Everything we're doing now should have been done first in the creation of these alternatives. And there should have been direction from the council also. How does the groundwater management plan fit into the comprehensive plan? 625 Winslow. The city knew last April and last May that they would need code changes for what they were proposing to be built, but they waited until a few months before a critical funding deadline to do anything about it. And I'm not sure, I often question, where's the communication, is there communication within City Hall between the different departments? Where's the coordination on these projects? Groundwater management plan lives in Public Works, but it's very much tied to the comprehensive plan, which lives in the planning department. Why isn't there coordination among these departments on these projects that were really impactful to the community? And so that's where whenever I attend these forums and I hear these conversations, for me it all goes back to the poorly designed process and the city council not being in charge of that and letting the city manager take the helm. And I don't think he understands our community or our values, and that's when you need the council to step up and take charge.
So thank you all. We really appreciate it. And if you could hang.